What hurt the most wasn't hearing my mother cry in the dark. It was when I opened my arms, and she turned her face away. My name is Mar, I'm 26 years old, and I'm from Vietnam. I studied in the United States, where I discovered Islam and converted. Leave a comment with where you're watching this video from, and share it if you or someone you know has also gone through a difficult time reconnecting with God. My name is Mar. I'm 26 years old, born in Vietnam and currently living in the United States. I grew up in a city where hardly anyone even knew what Islam was, let alone accepted the idea of a Vietnamese woman following that faith. For years, I lived torn between two worlds: respect for my cultural roots and the truth my heart had found in the Islamic faith. Before I continue with my testimony, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and drop a comment with where you're watching this video from. Your presence here is no coincidence. It took me months to gather the courage. It wasn't a planned moment. I just felt I couldn't carry everything alone anymore. Between one phone call and another, between forced laughter and questions about my life in the United States, I realized my sister was the only person in my family who might listen without judgment. Still, my heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear my own voice. It was a regular afternoon. I was sitting on the couch, holding my phone, staring at the screen like it might explode. And then, I simply typed, "I need to tell you something. I'm Muslim." The silence on the other end was the longest of my life. When the reply came, it was a splash of surprise. "You're kidding, right? Like, actually Muslim? One of those who wear the veil?" I took a deep breath. Yes, I thought the bond between us would break in that moment. But to my surprise, she started asking questions. Lots of them. And to each one, I answered from the heart. Not with doctrine, not with rules, but with my lived experience. I spoke of the peace I felt when praying, the comfort the Quran brought me, the clarity I found in the belief in one God. And little by little, her tone shifted, from suspicion to curiosity, from fear to respect. She promised she'd be by my side, and she kept her word. 5 years have passed since that conversation, and through all of them, my sister has been my anchor. When I had to hide my hijab during video calls with our parents, she was the one covering for my absences with excuses. When my mother came to visit and I started trembling at the thought that everything might be revealed, it was she who messaged me, "Stay calm, you're doing the right thing." In my family, no one else knew the truth yet. But thanks to her, I was no longer completely alone. And in that phase, it wasn't just support. It was salvation. She gave me advance notice. "I'm taking some time off and coming to spend a few days with you." I froze. Since converting to Islam, I hadn't seen my mother in person. For years, I had hidden my faith from her. I wore the hijab outside the house, but took it off for video calls. I avoided praying when she called. The whole time, I lived between two identities. And now, she would be in the same space as me. In the flesh. With questions. At the airport, I hugged her tightly. She was happy. I was nervous. I planned every detail of the visit. I hid my Arabic books, took the prayer rug out of the living room, stored away the more visible scarves. I prepared gifts, meals, and even a special massage. I wanted her to feel loved, and it worked. She spent the first day enchanted. She called relatives in Vietnam saying, "My daughter is amazing. She's treating me like a princess." But I knew it was only a matter of time. On the second day, the pieces started falling into place. I took my mother out to explore. All of my friends she met wore the veil. At one house, the TV was playing a channel with Arabic letters. She asked, "What language is that?" I replied, trying to sound natural. "Arabic. It's the sacred book's language of a friend of mine." She didn't say anything, but her eyes searched for signs everywhere. That night, already lying beside me in bed, with the lights off, my mother asked softly, "Are you hiding something from me?" The silence was a blade. My body froze. What was I supposed to say? I tried to control my breathing, but the tears came before the words. And then, I heard it. She started crying, slowly. A quiet cry, but one that pierced my chest. When I tried to hug her, she turned away. She rejected me. That hurt more than any argument. My mother had always been my safe haven, and now I was the source of her pain. She didn't yell. She didn't argue. She just cried. And the silence in that room became the hardest place I have ever inhabited. After that night, when my mother cried silently and turned her face away, everything between us changed. She spent the following days in cutting silence. She didn't mention what she felt, nor did she ask anything more about my faith. but her gestures said everything. She avoided looking at me during prayer. When she saw one of my scarves on a chair, she turned her face. The woman I had known, talkative, intense, full of affection, now fell silent, as if something irreparable had formed between us. At the airport, when saying goodbye, she hugged me tightly, almost as if to say, "I still love you, but I don't understand who you've become." Before boarding, she asked just one thing: "Don't tell your father. He's not ready." I agreed, not out of fear of him, but because at that moment, I didn't have the strength for another rupture. It was the last time I saw my mother with hope in her eyes. She kept the secret for an entire year. From afar, we kept in touch. She would ask occasional questions, disguised as curiosity. "Are you still hanging out with those Muslim friends? Are you still wearing that style of clothing?" She never mentioned the word Islam. It was as if the name of my faith was a thorn in her throat. But over time, the questions became confrontations. One day, we talked about death. She said, "If I die one day, you won't be here. You won't be able to pray for me. You won't be able to do what a daughter is supposed to do." That shattered me, because despite everything, I was still her daughter. I still loved her. And that kind of pain has no simple answer. All I could say was, "I pray for you every day, but now I pray to the only one who can truly hear." That's when she said, "I think it's time to tell your father." And just like that, what had been only a rift between her and me would become a family earthquake. But I knew hiding was no longer an option. The truth, even when it hurts, is the first step toward freedom. I had always known that when my father found out, there would be no middle ground. He was the kind of man who wore honor like armor. For him, tradition wasn't just a value, it was identity. When my mother finally told him, the silence was immediate. No words, no yelling, just that look. A look I had never seen before. A look of loss. In the days that followed, my father barely messaged me. When he finally did, it was just 3 words: "Choose between us." I reread that message so many times it etched itself into me. It was as if, instead of a conversation, he had thrown me into the fire. There was no room for explanation, no room for love, just an ultimatum. I froze. The girl who had grown up saying Hindu prayers beside her father, lighting candles at family festivals, was now being treated like a traitor. But I didn't see myself that way. I hadn't rejected them. I had simply chosen the truth that had silently burned inside me for years. I replied calmly. I told him that I loved him, that I would always love him, but that my faith was now part of who I was. And if he couldn't accept that, it wasn't because of a lack of love, it was because of fear. Fear of losing his daughter to something he couldn't understand. He saw the message. He didn't reply. For weeks, I heard nothing. And it was in that emptiness that I grew the most. The pain of his silence taught me more about patience than any lesson ever could. I kept being a daughter, sending updates, asking about him, sending gifts, all without a single response. And then, one day he replied, not with a sorry or an I understand, but with a short phrase, "Be discreet." It was his way of saying, "I still don't accept it, but I don't completely reject you either." That gave me strength, because I understood he was still struggling, not against me, but against everything the world had taught him a daughter should be. And I didn't blame him. His pain was real, but so was my choice. After my father's reaction, I expected the worst. I had already braced myself emotionally for the exclusion, the side eyes, the family whispers. In Vietnam, close relatives are almost extensions of our parents, so I imagined their judgment would be quick and ruthless. But that's not what happened. The first person I told was my closest cousin. She lives abroad, has traveled the world, and always had a more open mind. When I revealed that I was Muslim, she stayed silent for a few seconds. I braced myself for the shock, but then she said something that broke me inside. "I don't understand everything, but if this makes you happy, I'm with you." Those words felt like water after a long journey through the desert. For the first time since everything began, someone in my family looked at me with compassion instead of judgment. She promised to support me, and more than that, she said she'd talk to my mother, help ease the tension. Over time, other cousins found out too. To my surprise, 5 of them sent discreet messages saying they respected me. One even said he had read about Islam and admired how the religion upheld values like respect, generosity, and family. That was when something started to shift inside me. For the first time, I realized that my story wasn't just mine. It could reach others. My faith, hidden for so many years, began to serve as a bridge connecting me to new possibilities within my own family. And so, what I thought would be the end of family ties became the beginning of something new. A quiet support network made of subtle glances, words of encouragement, and promises of presence. It wasn't the full acceptance I dreamed of, but it was enough to keep going. No one mentioned the word Islam, but everyone knew. This time the silence wasn't open rejection, but thinly veiled discomfort. My mother, though calmer, still avoided the topic. Sometimes she looked away when she saw me praying. Other times she'd ask indirectly if I missed my culture. She didn't understand that my choice wasn't a rejection of who I was. It was an effort to be more faithful to what I had always felt. A longing for truth, for purity, for God without intermediaries. My father never brought it up again. He treated me with politeness, but with a distance I had never felt before, as if an invisible wall had been raised between us. One evening, I left a book about Islam on the table. Hours later, it was gone. No argument. Just the quiet realization that, even in silence, he was still wrestling internally with my decision. But in the midst of that silent tension, something unexpected happened. A few old neighbors, upon seeing me in hijab, approached to chat. One of them, who had always been close to my mom, said, "She looks different, but there's a peace in her eyes." My mother heard it and said nothing, but she stayed silent longer than usual. At that moment, I understood. Sometimes the greatest transformations don't happen in shouting, but in the silences that slowly soften. I didn't need to convince anyone. My life would be my answer. My faith, my steadfastness, my love for them, even without full approval, would be the bridge for what words could never explain. Today, when I look back, I don't see a story of rupture. I see a path of rebuilding. I didn't convert my mother. My father still clings to silence like a shield. Many relatives still don't understand, but something inside me has been restored. The courage to be who I am, even when that means losing what I once thought I couldn't live without. I no longer need to hide my hijab when answering calls. I don't make up excuses for missing rituals. I don't avoid their stares, because I've learned that dignity isn't something others grant. It's something God confirms, silently, deep in your soul. There are still hard days. Some doors still close. But new windows have opened, and through them, I see light. I see my sister, who now sends me voice notes asking about the Quran. I see my cousins, who even without faith, stand up for me when someone criticizes me. And I see my mother, who, even without fully understanding, now hugs me tighter, as if to say, "You're still my daughter." Maybe the greatest victory of faith isn't convincing others, but not losing yourself. And if I share this story today, it's not to inspire, it's to remind you. Truth hurts, but it sets you free. And it's worth it, even when the price is high. If you've made it this far, it's probably because you also carry questions, dilemmas, or maybe even similar scars. So I invite you, subscribe to the channel and follow more stories like this one. Because the journey for truth is a lonely one, but it never has to be lived alone.